The unalivings of Kate Bushell and Linda Lyn Bryant, a 14-year-old schoolgirl and a 41-year-old woman, occurred in separate incidents in the West Country, England. The events occurred on the 15th of November 1997 and on the 20th of October 1998. The similar circumstances of the unalivings led investigators to conclude that there is a high possibility that the unalivings are linked, and both unalived with knives while walking dogs along isolated lanes. Bushell was found with a throat cut 270 metres from her home. Bryant was stabbed a number of times. Her unaliver had apparently returned to the scene 4 months later to place her missing glasses back at the site. The apparently motiveless unalivings, as well as their particularly brutal nature and apparent links, led to fears that a serial unaliver was at large in the southwest at the time. In 2018, it was revealed that a DNA profile had been isolated in the Bryant case, leading to renewed hopes that the perpetrator could be identified. There is speculation that the unalivings could be linked to a similarly apparently motiveless unaliving of 66-year-old Helen Fleet, who was also walking a dog in Weston-super-Mare in 1987. If the perpetrator had unalived all 3 victims, he could be an unidentified serial unaliver. Both crimes made headline news and received significant coverage in the press and media, and both cases were featured on Crime Watch appeals. As of 2024, the case remains unsolved. They remain some of the UK's most notorious unsolved unalivings. Kate Bushell, a 14-year-old schoolgirl, lived in Exwick on the western edge of Exeter, Devon. On Saturday the 15th of November 1997, she set out to walk her neighbour's dog named Gemma as planned since they were away for the weekend. She walked up Exwick Lane, a narrow rural lane commonly used by dog walkers and Bushell herself. At 6 p.m, with Bushell having not returned home and it being dark, her parents drove up the lane in their car to search for her and also contacted the police. They searched the footpaths through the adjacent fields, and at 7:30 p.m, her father found Gemma and sadly saw that Bushell was lying dead next to her. Her throat had been cut. 3 suspicious figures were reported being near the scene by witnesses. A vagrant, a man with a blue car parked on Exwick Lane yards from the murder site, and a man seen running from the scene. None of these individuals came forward to the police, and the police would later state that they had indicated that they had something to hide. Most people in the community knew each other well, so it had been noted in the summer of that year that the vagrant had suddenly appeared in the area. In mid-September, a resident noticed an unknown man walking past him as he walked his dog, on a lane on the outskirts of Exwick. He was described as wearing a long, checky brown coat with big collar that was very tight to his neck, and that he had long, straggly hair. He was between 5'10" and 6 feet tall and between 30 and 40 years old. The witness said that he got the impression that the man had been sleeping rough in the area. The man was seen around the area several times by the same witnesses, and was described as wearing the same big coat even when it was hot. On the evening of Wednesday the 12th of November 1997, as the local resident again walked his dog down the lane, the vagrant suddenly came out from behind the trees and startled him. This was only 3 days before Bushell's murder and only half a mile from her home, on a lane which she regularly walked down. On the weekend before her murder, a neighbour saw an orange or red tent pitched near the spot she was found and killed, and it seemed unusual for someone to be camping on their own outside Exeter in mid-November. On the day of her murder, she had gone shopping with her mum in Exeter city centre. At 4:30 p.m, she left her house to walk Gemma, her next-door neighbour's dog. At 4:55 p.m, a father and his children who were walking down at the same time passed Bushell as she walked her dog up Exwick's Lane. A mother and her daughter driving down the lane at 5 p.m. reported passing Bushell and her dog as they drove towards Exwick. They noted that she was looking straight at them, which they thought was unusual, and slightly further up the road they saw a man stood by a small blue van which was parked on the southern side of the lane. It was parked facing away from Exwick, and police believe that it may have been a blue Vauxhall Astra van. The witnesses questioned what the man was doing there, and said after they heard of the murder that they felt guilty that they had not gone back to help Bushell in some way. The location the sighting was reported was only 91 metres from where Bushell was found murdered, and it was the last sighting of her alive. The sighting was also made only minutes before Bushell's murder took place. About a quarter of an hour before the sighting was made, 2 other witnesses had driven down the lane and seen a blue Ford Fiesta parked in the opposite direction, and that it was not known whether this was the same vehicle. The man didn't come forward, and neither he or his vehicle were traced. Half an hour after she was found dead, and half a mile away, a man was seen running from the direction of the lane into Cornflower Hill in Exwick, while the police helicopter was circling above. Police didn't know for sure if the sighting of the man was connected, and when Bushell's murder was featured on Crime Watch in January 1998, they appealed for him to come forward. He never did. Bushell's murder became front-page news nationally, provoking a national outcry, and what was described in an appeal on Crime Watch in January 1998 as one of those murder cases that as it was a child who was murdered, the case gained a particularly high amount of attention. It was noted on Crime Watch that the murder appeared to be the kind committed by a repeat offender, with viewers being told, the lead detective on the case, Mike Stevens, said that all the officers on the inquiry were concerned that the murder may just be the start of the killer's attacks. Bushell's murder featured on Crime Watch again on the 22nd of September 1998 as part of the Still Unsolved programme. At the conclusion of the second Crime Watch appeal, it was asked for individuals who knew the identity of the killer to come forward before he committed another offence. Almost exactly 1 month after this appeal, Bryant was sadly killed. On Tuesday, the 20th of October 1998, Linda Bryant, known as Lyn, a 41-year-old mother of two, was killed, and investigators quickly concluded that her murder might be linked to Bushell's. At 2:30 p.m, she was found by a gate to a field near her home in the Roseland Peninsula in Cornwall, 5 miles south of Truro, by a holidaymaker driving past. As in Bushell's case, her dog was found unharmed next to her. She had been stabbed a number of times in the neck and chest, and police called the murder horrendous. She had almost certainly fought with her attacker. She had almost certainly fought with her killer. She had been in contact with her attacker for a considerable amount of time, having been stabbed while standing and also in a horizontal position. At around lunchtime that day, between 12:30 and 11:45 p.m, a local woman driving to the nearby road from Truro and St. Mawes noticed a stranger walking down the road whom she thought looked odd. As she passed him in her vehicle, he looked straight at her, and this sighting was laid at the basis of a photo fit. He was 5'10", in his early 30s, with a squarish jaw and dark eyebrows. Bryant drove to Chenworth's garage at Ruin High Lanes and on the A3078 in her car and arrived at about 1 p.m, where she saw a friend and chatted with her. While they were talking, about 1:10 p.m, a small scruffy white van turned into the garage and parked at a strange angle, facing towards Bryant's car. The driver was between 30 and 50 years old, with a round face and a full brushy brown beard flecked with grey. He appeared quite big and seemed to be wearing a waxed green jacket. As soon as Bryant exited the petrol station, the identified van followed her out of the garage, which the employees of the garage thought was odd. It was later discovered that the van had also been sighted on the Friday and Saturday before the murder, and had also been sighted parked in a lay-by beside the chapel where she was found dead. The van was described as either a Austin Metro, a Ford Escort, or a Bedford van. Bryant returned home but left again at 1:35 p.m. to walk her dog along Ruin High Lanes, which she walked almost every day. She walked towards the Methodist Chapel and then left towards Trewoga. Then, between 1:45 and 2 p.m, a witness driving past saw Bryant speaking with a man outside the chapel, 91 metres from where she was later found dead. He was described as 5'9" in his 30s and wearing light clothing. A farmer moving his animals at the murder site didn't report seeing Bryant at around 2 p.m, but she was found dead at this location shortly after. The possible links between Bushell and Bryant's murder were noted on Crime Watch on the 10th of November 1998, and the lead detective on the Bryant inquiry, Chris Borland, said that there were although he said that the murder could also have been merely been local in character. He also said that they were working closely with the Bushell investigation team. Both victims had been out walking their dogs in the southwest when they were attacked and brutally murdered, apparently without motive. Borland said, an appeal was made to doctors and psychiatrists who may have had a patient that may have been capable of such a violent crime. Indicated that detectives thought the killer may have been mentally ill. It was concluded that the man in the white van was a strong suspect for the crime and that it was said that he didn't appear to be local. Bryant's murder made headline news and was heavily reported in the press and media. The murder occurred at a time when other high-profile killings were in the news. Ongoing at the time was a high-profile trial of Michael Stone and the Russell murders in Chillenden, Kent, and 3 days later, after Bryant was murdered, Stone was convicted of the crimes. A mother and 2 daughters had been attacked by a man whilst walking their dog. Bryant's glasses were missing from her body and not initially found by investigators, which detectives noted on Crime Watch 3 weeks later. The police investigating Bushell's murder found a number of man-made dens in the area around where she was found dead. Police appealed for any children or adults who would use them to come forward and eliminate themselves from the inquiry. A black bin liner which was also found contained an individual's personal effects, and some unidentified fingerprints were found on the bin liner. On Crime Watch in January 1998, the lead detective Mike Stevens appealed to the community of Exwicks directly, saying that someone in the community knew who the perpetrator was and requested that they help to bring him to justice. Despite the high profile of the Bushell case, the appeal on Crime Watch in January 1998, the killer was not caught quickly. Another appeal was made on Crime Watch's Still Unsolved programme on the 22nd of September 1998, in which Stevens said that he was 90% certain that the killer was a local man or someone who had local knowledge. He also stated that the man was right-handed, possibly an owner of a blue vehicle, and may have had prior experience of slaughtering animals, particularly sheep. A psychological profile of the killer was also revealed, and said that the killer was likely Despite the high profile of Bushell's killing and the appeals, none of the three suspicious figures in the area of Bushell's murder, the vagrant, the man with a vehicle 100 yards from the murder site, or the man running from the scene, came forward, and Mike Stevens stated in November 1998, of the man seen by the blue vehicle very close to the scene, he said, "Police found nothing in Bryant's background that would lead them to believe that she could be the subject of such an attack. Detectives traced the owners of 8,000 similar vans to the one of the suspect that was seen driving in the area of Bryant's murder in Devon and Cornwall, but didn't find the vehicle, indicating that the driver may have come from outside the area. A criminal profiler of the killer of Bryant's case said that he would likely be Detectives believe that Bryant didn't know her killer. Lead detective Chris Borland concluded, "In both Bushell and Bryant's cases, it was ultimately concluded that the motive was sexual, even though neither of the victims had been essayed. In both cases, this was because of the way their clothes had been disturbed by their killer. The murderers were described as 6,000 people were DNA tested in the first few years of the Bryant investigation, indicating that investigators had DNA evidence. In early January 1999, a knife attack on a mother and her daughter in the area prompted fears of a serial killer being at large in the area, and that he was stalking women in the area. A man with a knife had deliberately driven his car into a 17-year-old girl and then drove her and her mother to a nearby field. They fought their way out of his car while he lashed out and slashed the mother's hands. The attack happened while they were walking their dog in a country lane in Netherton near Newton Abbot, Devon, and Devon and Cornwall police said that the similarities between the incident and the two murders were too obvious to ignore. The man had driven past them on the lane in a blue-grey Vauxhall Cavalier saloon, before coming up behind them again at a slow speed several minutes later before deliberately driving into the daughter's legs. The driver got out and held a knife to the girl's throat, saying that he would cut her unless they did as he ordered. The man matched the descriptions of the suspects in the two murders, described as white, 30 to 40, and of medium height. He was 5'8", well built, with short fair hair and a roundish face. In late January, there was another attack on a woman out walking her dog, 15 miles from the scene of Bryant's murder, and police investigated whether her attack was linked to the murders. She'd been attacked in a lane near Camborne, Cornwall, by a man driving a black vehicle. He was described as large, between 30 and 40, with light hair and wearing dark trousers and a light top. In February 1999, 4 months after Bryant's murder, it was reported that Bryant's missing glasses had turned up at the scene of her murder, despite the scene being meticulously searched at the time of the killing and not having been found. Detectives said that they believed that the killer could have returned to the gateway where her body was found and placed her glasses there. They had been found at the scene by a local man and given to the police. One possibility investigated by police was that the killer had returned them to the scene as he wanted to be caught. On the 2nd of July 2000, there was an incident in which a woman was stalked 300 yards by a man carrying a 6-inch knife in Salcombe, Devon. Occurring at 7:30 p.m, an All Station dog barked at the man and he ran off. Detectives investigated whether the incident could have been linked to the murders. The man was white with a suntan, about 40, and clean-shaven. He got out of a dark blue Volvo car and was wearing green corduroy trousers and a blue sweatshirt. Chris Boland, formerly detective on the Bryant case in 2014. Despite the high profile of the cases, they eventually went cold, with both investigations remaining open. Investigators found that a number of bright orange fibres had been left at or near the scene of Bushell's murder, and police continue to appeal to the public to come forward if they know of anyone who owned such orange clothing at the time. In 2014, it was revealed that these fibres had been contaminated in 1999 with purple fibres from a lab technician, when the evidence was examined as part of a forensic review. This led to fears that a prosecution would no longer be possible, but police responded in 2014 by saying that it was still possible as some evidence was unaffected. Over time, the cases had been speculatively linked to a number of known killers. In 2001, the two murders were linked to Philip Smith in the press after he killed 3 women randomly in Birmingham. It was said that he regularly visited Cornwall and Devon with the fairground he worked for and had a sister who lived in Exeter. In 2012, possible links between Bushell's murder and the serial killer David Burgess, responsible for the Beenham murders, were investigated after it was discovered that he had been released from prison between 1996 and 1998, a time and period where Bushell was killed. No links were found to either of the killers. New leads were investigated after a 20th anniversary appeal for Bushell's murder in 2017, but they didn't lead anywhere. Detectives remain convinced that Bushell's killer had a local connection due to the location of the crime scene, which was an isolated rural spot mainly used as a cut-through by local dog walkers. Detectives have also highlighted how the killer would have taken the knife with him that day to the scene, showing that he set out to cause harm. In October 2018, it was revealed that a partial DNA profile of the killer of Bryant had been isolated during a 2016 forensic review of the case. Detectives said that it could be used to eliminate suspect only, and revealed that they were retesting some of the 6,000 people who had their DNA tested in the original investigation. The police had to destroy previous DNA evidence they had in 2013 due to change in law. It was also announced that 3 suspects arrested in the initial investigation had now been eliminated forensically. It was also said that the 3 men of interest in the Bryant murder had still not been identified. The scruffy-bearded driver of the white van seen following her out of the garage, the man seen talking to her beside the chapel shortly before she was killed, the last known sighting of her, and a clean-shaven man wearing normal clothes who was seen by the farmer walking through the field away from the scene, which the farmer said was unusual. Detectives believe that the most critical sighting of Bushell's murder is of the man with a blue car 91 metres from the murder site. There still remains a £10,000 reward for information leading to the capture of the killer of Bushell. There is also a £10,000 reward for information leading to the capture of the killer of Bryant. On the 14th of November 2022, Devon and Cornwall police launched a renewed appeal to the public. Appeal for information to find Bushell's killer. A £20,000 reward was offered by the charity Crime Stoppers for information which leads to the arrest and conviction of the offender. In October 2023, the 25th anniversary of the murder of Lyn Bryant, police launched a new appeal. Crime Stoppers offered a £20,000 reward for information. Bushell's unaliving case is Devon and Cornwall Police's biggest and most high-profile unaliving investigation, with the investigation costing more than £1 million by 2018. Bryant's case, meanwhile, had cost £2 million by 2018. Both Bushell and Bryant's unalivings continue to be heavily featured in the news, and was heavily publicised on the 20-year anniversary of their unalivings in 2017 and 2018. Bushell and Bryant's unalivings are seen as some of the most notorious unalivings in Britain, and are seen as particularly notorious unsolved unalivings in the West Country. In 2009, Bushell's case was discussed in detail in a chapter of the book by Vanessa Brown titled Britain's 10 Most Wanted. The possible links between Bushell and Bryant's unalivings continue to be noted in the press and media. Retired detective Chris Clark claimed that the 2 unalivings could be linked to the unaliving of 66-year-old Helen Flea in Wilbury Woods in Weston-super-Mare in March 1987. She had also been randomly unalived while out walking her dog, which was also left unharmed and had not been SA'd or robbed. Clark claimed that there was a similar sighting of the pale van nearby. The Bushell case was considered to be linked to the unaliving of Julia Webb, who was unalived while walking her dog in Sandyway, Cheshire on the 22nd of July 1998, but a link was ruled out 1 month later. That case also remains unsolved.